Hello, my dear friends. I hope you're all doing very well. Today we're going to be learning the final chapter, the 10th chapter of the laws of Tefillin, Mezuzah, and the Sefer Torah, the Torah Scroll. And we're going to be learning all about how to properly care and honor for a Torah. And introducing into this chapter, the Rambam will now give us a short summary of everything that we've learned, the various details of the things that are extremely important that qualify a Torah and make it into a Torah. And if it's missing one of these qualities, then it would be disqualified as a Torah and would just be like a regular chumash, like a regular book of the Torah, which we can learn from and read from, but it would not have the holiness of a Torah scroll. And they are as follows. First of all, the Torah, if it is written on if the Torah is written on the hide of a non-kosher animal, that would disqualify it. If it was written on the hide of a kosher animal, but it wasn't properly processed to make into parchment. If it was processed, but it wasn't done with the intent that it is for a Torah scroll, if it was written on the wrong side of the parchment, that would also disqualify it. Or if you have two different types of parchments, because there are various layers of the hide that are peeled off, that would not be any good. And there is one specific type which is entirely not good. If the Torah was written without being ruled, without having the lines prepared to make sure the writing is straight, or if it was not written with black ink that is durable and will last. If it was written not in the original language of Hebrew, if it was written by someone who does not believe in God, or someone who is not does not fit the category of those who are able to write a Torah. If it was written with the names of God without the intent that they are being written, without thinking that you're writing God's name, that would also disqualify a Torah. If it is missing one letter, or if it has an extra letter, or if you have two letters that are touching one another, or if any letter was deformed, that it doesn't look like itself the way it's supposed to look. Or if you have letters that are too close to each other, words that are too close to each other, so they look like one word, or one word that is too spaced, that it looks like two words, or if he changed the order of how the paragraphs are supposed to look like, or the songs that are mentioned in the Torah. Or if he wrote other texts in the way that the songs are supposed to be, where they have this special spacing, as we've learned about. And the last thing is that if the Torah was sewn with the sinus of a non-kosher animal, then it would not be qualified and would not have the holiness of a Torah. So these are the 20 important things that we have to keep in mind when making a Torah scroll. And that's pretty much that. Now, moving along, the Rambam now continues to discuss the proper treatment and sanctity that we have to give the honor for a Torah scroll. So he says that a person should, first of all, a Torah is extremely holy, and therefore we have to give it lots of honor. And therefore a person, even if he owns a Torah, should never sell it so that they can have more money. Even if he doesn't have what to eat. And even if he has many Torah scrolls. Still, a person, if he has a Torah scroll, because it's such a special thing, they should keep it. And even if you want to sell an older one in order to be able to buy a better one, that's also frowned upon. And a person should only sell the Torah for two things. If they have to study Torah, if they need to learn how to study, and they have no money to do that, so then they're allowed to sell the Torah. Or if it is to get married, since this is the continuity of this world, and it's extremely important mitzvah. But for any other reasons, a Torah should not be sold. Now, if a Torah with time, it gets old, and now it's become too worn out, and it's disqualified for use, so we have to intone the Torah, and we bury it, and it's the best possible thing would be to bury it near a Torah scholar, someone who has used and learned the Torah a lot. And that would be a very positive thing. Now, if we have the mantle, the cover for the Torah, which has become used and worn, and now it's old, and we are getting a new one for the Torah, so the old one we actually use as shrouds for a corpse of someone who passed away, and this is what is used, and it's a very proper way of burying it, of putting it away after it's done its job. And in general, we have to also show honor for the various articles that are used together with the Torah. For instance, the Torah's crown, or the mantle, as we said, the special overcoat cover that we use for the Torah, or any other special parts that are used for the actual Torah. But if we're talking about the table which is used for the Torah, and so on and so forth, so that wouldn't have the same holiness as the Torah itself, but still we shouldn't just discard them, but it wouldn't have the same holiness, and doesn't have to be buried in the same way as the articles that are used with the Torah itself. And you're allowed to put a Torah on top of another Torah, but you're not allowed to put anything else on top of the Torah. And in general, if we have the 5 books of Moses, we should not put anything on top of them. Even if it's not a Torah, it's just a regular Chumash, printed volume. Because it is so holy, so therefore we should not put anything on top of it. Even if it's the prophets or the scriptures or any other Torah books, the Chumash should be on the top. The 5 books of Moses should be on the top, and anything else should go under them. And by the way, just on a general note, it's a very important thing to note that whenever we have a holy object, a prayer book or a Torah book, it's because of its holiness, so therefore we should always make sure that it's the right way up. It shouldn't be upside down, or we shouldn't put stuff on top of it. So much so that there was actually a painting that someone drew of a great rabbi. This is just on a side note. A painting that someone drew of a great rabbi, and he drew that his glasses were on top of the book he was holding. And he said that they should fix it because he obviously was not holding it like that, because that is not correct according to Jewish law. So it's just an interesting thing. Now, continuing on, the Rambam says that a person should not hold the Torah scroll and go into a bathhouse or into a bathroom or into a cemetery, even if it's inside a case or even if it's inside a bag. Still, it's not honorable for the Torah to be in such a place, so therefore you shouldn't do that. Similarly, if a person is not wearing clothing, or if the Torah is lying on a bed, a person shouldn't sit down near it, and that's not very honorable for the Torah. And in general, a person should, if a Torah is in someone's house, in the room where a person is, they have to be giving the Torah the honor that it needs. So therefore, if it's in a person's bedroom, a person should be very careful and should not have relations in that room where the Torah is, unless, worst case scenario, if he has no other room where to put it, so then he should either cover it with have like a wall, something that's in between the bed and where the Torah is being stored, and it should be something which is not specific for the Torah, but rather another article which is going to be covering between the Torah and the use of the room. But the truth is, at the end of the day, the Torah can never become impure. So therefore, anyone is actually allowed to hold the Torah, whether it is a Jew or a non-Jew. Everyone can touch the Torah, can hold it, as long as their hands are not dirty, and they're in a befitting state. The Torah can be held. And whenever a person sees a Torah, they should always stand up whenever the Torah is coming up, towards them or passing them, and until the Torah has passed them and has now gone out of sight, so then the person can continue sitting down and relaxing. And we should really designate a place, a special place for the Torah scroll, and honor it and glorify it. And the Rambam says that we should really give it such a strong honor. It should be in like an extravagant manner. It should be like more than what you would think. In other words, it should be in a really special way. And if there's a Torah, out, a person shouldn't spit near it, and so on and so forth, or take off his shoes and relax, or it shouldn't hold the Torah in a way, on top of his head or over his shoulder. That's not very nice. But rather, he should hold it in a proper way, leaning on his chest and so on. And even if someone is traveling with a Torah, he should not just have it in a bag, or that's not very nice. But rather, he should hold it in a proper way, unless there is a reason that it has to be that way. If someone is, he has to put it, in back in the day, he would have an animal, maybe a donkey or something, and he would have it, putting it on the donkey, if they're worried about thieves who might steal it and so on. But if it's possible for a person to be able to hold the Torah, that's obviously the best, proper way. And whenever a person is sitting in front of a Torah, they should sit with the proper respect, awe, and fear, because the Torah is the testimony of God and is the covenant between us, the Jewish people, and God. And it is the sign of between God and the Jewish people for all the inhabitants of the world that can see, as it says in the Torah, that it will be a testimony for you, for the Jewish people. And therefore a person should always honor the Torah to the fullest extent of their potential. So much so that the sages say that a person who will honor and give, a person who gives honor to the Torah, then that person will be honored by people. And if God forbid the opposite, a person who desecrates the Torah, he will be desecrated by people. God forbid. But therefore we understand we have to give lots of honor to a Torah. That's why whenever we take out the Torah, we always give it a kiss, and so on. In Corona, you should be careful. But that is the laws of the Torah. So we have completed the entire 10 chapters of learning all about Tefillin, Mezuzah, and a Torah scroll. So the Rambam completes them by saying, "Blessed be God who offers assistance, who has helped him to write these laws." And with that, we have completed today's class. Well, we'll see you guys tomorrow, and we'll be learning the laws of tzitzit, special mitzvah, which we'll learn all about over the next couple days. Have a very good one in the meantime. All the best.